Joining us for the first time on Geopolitics and Empire is Rafi Farber, who's the publisher of the Endgame Investor, which you can find on Substack. The link is in the description below. He focuses on monetary analysis from an Austrian School perspective as we head into the end game for the global fiat monetary system. Welcome, Rafi.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I've been following your work for a few years now, and I thought I should get Rafi on. And I think I've had a few listeners over the years as well say, get Rafi on. And for those people listening or viewing who are not aware of your work, whatever you want to tell us about the work that you're doing at Endgame Investor.
So my goal is to get people to understand that we are headed to an end game, which means the end of the monetary system, but it's not going to be as if the evil in the world is going to take over everything and we're going to be slaves forever and everything is doomed and they're going to have complete control over our lives. They will try that. I don't deny that they try to do this, and that is their goal. I know that, but they will fail because it's impossible to take over the world. Because the process of a massive pyramid falling down means that the powers that be lose their power. Their power is in the money printing itself. It's in the inflation. And you have to understand what money is in order to understand why what they're doing cannot succeed. And that is that gold and silver are money, and that everything else is based on that because of the Misesian principle of the regression theorem, or you could say just the regression principle. I call it. Mises is that guy in the background. Kind of looks like Hitler. He's not Hitler. He's a Jewish economist. Not the founder of the Austrian School, but the most famous of the Austrian School economists. And his explanation of money is that prices always have to go back into the past because otherwise prices would have no economic meaning. The only way we divide labor is through prices. Prices tell us everything about what we have to do for the day and how much it will cost and how much we have to save and everything like that. Everybody knows where they are in the division of labor because of prices, and prices only have meaning because they're connected to the past. And when you go back far enough, the only thing that establishes prices is liquidity. So money is by definition the most liquid physical commodity that exists in an economic system. In a prison, it could be tons of mackerel. But in an entire global economy, it tends to be silver and then gold. So everything goes back to there, and everything else is a derivative of that. So when the pyramid does fall, all the derivatives lose their purchasing power, and you're left with real assets. And the most liquid real asset will be gold and silver. Other real assets will retain value like real estate and stuff like that. But you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you have to sell your house for a week's worth of food because your house isn't very liquid. You want to have liquid commodities so you can trade, and the price of everything on the planet will go way, way down in terms of real money. So what I'm saying is, if we don't like the bad people, and we don't, and we know they're trying to take over the world, and they are, the best thing that we can do is collect real money now and then spend it as fast as possible when everything falls, so that we end up with most of the capital and they end up with nothing, or much less than they do now.
So right out the gate, you're throwing white pills, which is good. And you've already answered some of my questions, but I want to just dig a bit deeper. Maybe just to get your diagnosis of, before I ask you more about their machinations and what life will look like on the other side, where we currently are. For the past decade plus, I've had on the podcast the Peter Schiffs, the Jim Rogers, the Mark Fabers, you name it. And, as you say, we all know that we're hitting the end of the road, the debt, the dollar, the gold. Currently, where do you sort of assess where we're at and how much longer? I mean, nobody knows. I know I don't want to put you on that spot, but just if you'd have to give an estimate, how much longer can this go for?
Well, I have a lot of different calculations in my head, and I'm not attached to any one of them. I'm willing to keep going on this until it happens because I know it eventually will. But if you're to ask me and try to pigeonhole me, and I'm not saying that negatively, you have to ask the question. It's a rational question to ask. I think we've got months left, and I say this. A lot of the people that I follow that are also pretty level-headed people, they're not hysterical, everything's going to come to an end. They understand that there's serious things going on, but they try to keep a level head, which is the tone that I try to maintain. they are also suggesting to me that we have one more round of monetary inflation, meaning expanding of the dollar supply, wherever you put it in the system. There's going to be one more. Um, Something is going to buckle, something is going to crack, and every time that you increase the money supply, I don't want to say the money supply, it's really the derivative or the credit supply. Every time you do that, you have to up the dose. And we see that pattern everywhere in nature. When you're doing something unnatural, when you're doing something that is violative of natural law, and theft is violative of economic law, because economics is the study of cooperation and scarcity and choice between humans. So if you introduce theft into that, that goes against economics. An economy only exists insofar as theft doesn't. Right? I'm not saying you can't have a coexisting theft and an economy. You can't. Clearly, you can. There's criminals, but when you have an entire economy that's based on the concept of theft, which is what inflation is, because what you're doing is they're adding credits into the system that are that can only draw their purchasing power from existing resources that do not belong to them. So they introduce a claim on existing resources that took them zero effort to put in, right? And now they can claim resources and make themselves richer. That's theft. So the entire system is based on that, and you can't have that. You can't have that continue. And given that our entire system is based on theft, when you have, for example, somebody on drugs, they're putting stuff in their bodies that, yeah, their bodies recognize. We're trained to, we have endorphins that our brains produce. So we figured out these chemicals that plants also produce, and we put them in our brain, and then it drives us wild or whatever it does to us. But every time you do that, you need to up the dose. So it's the same thing with money, right? We know what a dollar is. We know what existing resources are. So you introduce those into the system, and you gin it up or you drug it up. So we've got one more round. Because if you look at every round of inflation from 1933, when this started, to now, every time it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The last one was about $4 or $5 trillion in was a few from like 3 weeks to 4 or 5 months or something in 2020 and 2021. That was the injection. So this time, if the last time was, let's say, 4 trillion conservatively, this is going to be like 8 to 10 trillion. And gold and silver are already moving vertically. What silver is up another 4% today. Like just a few weeks ago, I think literally a few weeks ago, gold was like in the low 3,000s. Now it's 4,100. This is already happening. And the final stages of hyperinflation are always the quickest and the most devastating. So we've got a few months left, and from what I'm seeing, with wars breaking out everywhere and political tensions getting higher, and basically just the insanity of the average person just getting worse and worse. And I see kids not thinking, not being able, not being trained to use their minds. We are filling the world with zombies. We all saw that during COVID, turned everyone into zombies, whether actual zombies or just because they obeyed everything that was happening without thinking. Everybody's a zombie. And this is because of the inflation. We can't continue like this. So when I say we have months left, I hope we only have months left, not because my personal financial situation will be better. I don't know if I'm going to get through this. I want to, and I feel good about it, but I don't know for sure. Like, I say this a lot, but I've seen the end game coming for many, many years. But when 2020 hit, it was like a new level. And I finally realized, I internalized that this is not going to be fun for me, even though I'm prepared monetarily. I was not prepared for everyone to turn into the zombie that they did. I almost broke. The only thing that kept me together was my family. So, like, I know the end game's not going to be fun, but I also know that's the only way out. The only way out is through, like mourning. So let's get it done with. So when I say months, it's hopeful, but I do have what to base it on. We've got one inflation run left, and that should be it.
On one of your recent YouTube videos, you said the same thing that happened right before COVID with the repo is happening now. A lot of people reported it was in September, October 2019, and then you had COVID. My listeners know We've looked at there were many simulations for the COVID event beforehand, and so just any thoughts on what just tell us a bit about what you were talking about in that YouTube video regarding what you saw right before COVID, and then how that might play out
Oh,
right now.
so I was speculating. I try to keep my theories to a minimum. I don't want to subscribe to any single conspiracy theory, though some of them might be accurate, some of them won't. I keep myself out of that because to me it doesn't really matter exactly how the plan came through or who did it. Like it happened anyway, and now I'm in this reality. So it's for example, it's like my position on is there an afterlife? Well, I think so, but I have no evidence experientially one way or another. So like whatever is, whatever isn't, and I'll just live a moral life anyway. So I try not to have a theory as to exactly what the afterlife looks like. I don't know. So what I was saying in that video was that before COVID, there was a clog in the banking system. Just like our circulatory systems has veins and arteries. The biggest artery is the aorta. That's the main. And I was actually listening to a podcast, Brett Weinstein, talking about aortic dissections and the COVID jab. So these EMTs were seeing a lot of aortic dissections right after the jab came out. But yeah, I know that. So the aorta of the monetary system is the repo market. That's where right now $3.1 trillion flows through that aorta every night. And it's not like it's a choice, like, oh, we can just stop that, right? All of the price array of everything in the world is now dependent on that aorta. And that's one of the mechanical reasons why every time you have an inflation round, a money printing round, it has to get bigger and bigger because that money that they print or those dollars that they print, it ends up in the basement and it goes through the aorta, it goes through the repo system, changing hands between banks for treasuries, treasuries for cash, cash for treasuries, and upon that, all other transactions are based. I don't need to describe it. There's no need for me to describe how the blood from your aorta goes through the ventricles and then goes through all the limbs of your body. It does. You can trust me that it does. So it's the same thing with the monetary system. And now some people want to say that the COVID event was there purposely so that the Fed would have an excuse to print money and alleviate the repo stress. Maybe that's true, but again, is there an afterlife? I don't know. We needed to have a printing round, right? Because otherwise, the inflationary system that we have would have fell in on itself, collapsed in on itself, and everything would have gone to gold and silver anyway, as it always does at the end of every inflationary cycle of every country. The only difference now is that we're not talking about a single country, we're talking about the entire planet because everything is dollar based. So what I was saying was if COVID really was an excuse to print and it was planned that way, then we're close to the next event, whatever it's going to be, that will force money printing. But is it going to prove anything anyway? Because let's say it's going to be a war, a world war or something. Whatever is going to necessitate $1 trillion of money printing, they'll make that excuse, and then they'll they'll massage our patriotic feelings, and Trump will get up there and say, if you're really an American, then you're going to, we have to print money to do this or whatever it is that we're going to rescue the world. I don't know what he's going to do. But and don't get me wrong, I'm very happy that Trump is at the helm and not Harris. But I still understand that no one can save the system. But the way I look at it is, well, at least we can save some children from being mutilated. That's a good thing. We can change the culture a little bit from the worst aspects of it. So I'm positive about that. But yeah, the bottom line is we are in the same situation now where we were in 2019, where there are not enough bank reserves to support the $3.1 trillion size of the repo market. There's only about $2.8 trillion of reserves left. There's some overcounting there. There's some overlap because some of that volume is double counted. So exactly where the wall is hit, I don't know. But if you look at repo rates, and they're published on the Federal Reserve's website every night, they are trickling up, and every end of month they get spiked. And it's not going to be long now before they start expanding their balance sheet. And then what happened in 2019 is they started expanding their balance sheet September 2019, and then March 2020 we had the event that that brought out the zombie in every NPC on the planet.
I was reading this morning, well, over the weekend, Trump announced 50-year mortgages, which sounds a lot like the you will own nothing because you won't own your house. You'll, by the time you die, you'll own your house. I paid mine off in less than a decade, and they were saying he was talking about these stimulus um, checks for $2,000 for related to the tariffs, and I don't want to accept mine because I think that contributes to the um, inflation. But just real quick before getting to dollar and gold and silver, what you alluded to earlier, this great reset plan that a lot of us are following for neo-feudal solutions, right? CBDCs, digital IDs, digital passports, digital controls. So you think they're not going to succeed in sort of implementing that?
I know they're not going to succeed. It's not in the DNA of the planet that God created. And this is where my beliefs get actually very strong, because it's the only way I can keep myself sane. I could be wrong, but if I didn't believe these things, I would lose it. So what I believe is that God does not allow a single party to take over the planet. This is a narrative that we had back in the Tower of Babel. Whether or not you believe that story is historical is beside the point. The point is that it's an ancient story, and whoever was the author of it, that's the message that he was saying. That when a single communist comes together and says, we're going to do this one project, and that's going to be the only goal, and everyone's going to be controlled, it's not going to work. It's going to stop. God's going to come down and stop it. It doesn't mean we're going to have literal divine intervention of a hand coming down from the sky and stuff. Every time somebody tries to take over the planet, it doesn't work. It's not going to work this time. The only question is collateral damage. And there was a lot of collateral damage after the Tower of Babel, probably, if I was in that society, and then it stopped, and then nobody had a job, and then they'd be starving, and it would be a problem. But if you weren't building the tower, then you're okay. I mean, hopefully you could be collateral damage also, but hopefully not. So CBDCs, a lot of wary people who are right to be wary are worried that CBDCs will destroy any liberty that we have left, and that, yes, that is the goal of the CBDC, and I don't deny that. But a CBDC is a derivative of a derivative of a derivative of a derivative of gold, right? It's just a higher layer on the pyramid, and just like the regression principle states that all prices have to go into the past, the CBDC has to be there at the top of the pyramid, relying on everything else underneath. That's all still there. So the principle is you cannot stabilize a pyramid by building another layer that makes it even taller. It just makes it more unstable, right? In the end, if the CBDC is not exchangeable for gold, then it's not exchangeable for anything. Anything that is no longer if you cannot buy gold with $1, if I come to somebody and I say, here's whatever, how many dollars do you want for an ounce of gold, and any amount, and I'll give it to you, and they say no, then the dollar doesn't buy anything, nothing, because gold is the money and the dollar is just the derivative. So they'll try to build a CBDC layer. It's not going to work. It will make the pyramid even more unstable. When it falls, all the purchasing power will go back into gold anyway.
I had on 5 years ago. I consider him renowned, the Jewish historian Edwin Black, and he talked about algorithm ghetto, which is what you're alluding to. But what they're trying to build, this sort of algorithm ghetto, and I hope you're right that it doesn't work. I think in the end, it's not going to work. I agree with you. It's not going to work. My question is just the pain, this process that they're putting us through, how painful it's going to be. Thoughts on the dollar? Is it going to hyperinflate? And then some of us see this whole process of what they're doing with the stablecoin and Tether and Bitcoin. I've been saying it's Bretton Woods 3.0. So they're trying to kick the can down the road for the third time. And so they're building this whole structure, as you sort of laid out. It's another layer upon a layer, and it's very unstable. But for now, they seem to be having momentum, where they're dollarizing and pushing through this stable coinization of parts of the world. Just thoughts on what the game is here, and what what's going to happen with the dollar and the stable coins.
The stable coins, I don't think they're going to be able to implement them in time to before the end game hits, because I think we only have a few months left. I'm looking at the price action of gold. What are we at now? Are we past 41.50? It could be. I don't know, every day gold can go up $300 now. It's like that happens. That's a thing now. Um, the Stable Coin Act, whatever it's called, what was it? The
Genius.
Genius
Genius.
Genius Act. The Genius Act. All it is they just want to create another round of tickets on top of which will be backed by treasuries, which are backed by dollars, which are backed by gold. Right? It's just another derivative layer. So if for example, if we just, let's get out of the stratosphere for a second where the CBDCs are and go back to what we can recognize, bank deposits, right? Bank deposits operate on a fractional reserve system where not all of the physical dollars are there. If you want to take out your cash, you can't do it all because only a certain fraction are there. Let's say 10%, it could be less, So you have everyone using bank deposits on a pile of cash reserves that don't actually exist. But the bank deposits stabilize the cash until there's a bank run, which there always is. So the stable coins would be like the equivalent of bank deposits to what bank deposits are now for dollars. Except you have the treasuries in the middle there. It's like several layers up, but it's the same concept, right? You'd have all these people with a bunch of stable coins, which would be backed by a smaller pile of treasuries where everyone with a stable coin would think they have the claim to a certain amount of treasuries, but they don't because that amount of treasuries doesn't exist. So until you have somebody, a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of parties cashing in their treasuries so they can cash in for dollars, and then it doesn't work, and then what has to happen is that the Fed has to bail everything out again. But it's just a bank run at another level, and there's no immunity to economic law, no matter how far into space you are. It's all based on the same pyramid that's attached to the ground, based on gold and silver, and no matter how high you go, you can't separate the pyramid from the ground and completely detach it from physical corporeal reality, because otherwise prices have no meaning, and then the entire division of labor breaks down completely.
And then I guess to jump to gold. So there was a meeting maybe a month back where the Russians seem to be calling out this Ponzi scheme, the stablecoin whole, the Ponzi scheme. And then maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like central banks are buying gold in mass, particularly the East. So do you think different parties, whether they're central banks, nations? I mean, I read about China setting up these gold yuan exchanges. Do you think the smart money is preparing for what comes after this crash with gold?
No, I don't. I think that's all a myth. I've looked into this whole central banks are buying gold scheme. They're not. Their central banks have a lot less gold than they did in the 1950s. There are certain isolated central banks that sometimes accumulate and then they sell it, and they accumulate more and then they sell it. But on net, they're not accumulating anything. That's not happening. China is not preparing for a gold-backed yuan. That's not going to happen. It's impossible. Because in order to look, if gold is money and everything collapses because the derivatives no longer work or the credit no longer works, China, no country can say, well, everything collapsed. Well, now you can trust my ticket, my yuan ticket for a certain amount of gold, and believe me, it's there. And everyone says, oh, sure, great. What, we're going to trust China now. After America stole everything and printed everything and inflated everything up the wazoo, we're going to go to China. And okay, so that's first of all. It would have to be a credible gold standard, which means that people would have to be able to take their yuan to the Chinese central bank and say, here, give me my gold. And this would have to be openly exchangeable, very verifiable for months, years. America was only able to build a huge inflationary pyramid, gargantuan, massive global inflation pyramid, because it had such an honest, relatively honest monetary system for so long, for centuries. There were isolated bank runs, yeah, but those cleared out. There were minor depressions on those bank panics. Every time there was a bank panic, it cleared out a small layer of inflation that was corrupting the system, and it brought it back down to the base and brought back down money to a more honest base of what it was. Right? And then you could rebuild from there. It's like building tiny pyramids. They fall, but people still trust your base. there's no way that after this dollar system falls, on which the yuan right now is based, after that falls, any country, any central bank is going to have to say, oh, well, we have the real gold-backed yuan or whatever it is now. It's not happening. It's impossible. And even if they wanted to do it, let's say we had these saints in charge of China. It's a ridiculous thought, but let's just assume that they're good people and they're like all Misesians now. They've learned Austrian School economics and they want sound money and they're now libertarian Chinese communists, whatever you want to call them. And they want an honest monetary system. So okay, fine. If they want that, they have to be willing to collapse their entire banking system and then risk assassination by the big bank honchos of their country, and they're going to get killed. So no, it's not happening.
Yeah, that makes perfect. I mean, what you laid out makes perfect sense. And what about prices of gold? You know, a lot of us, you listen to James Rickards. Hugh Hendry was citing James Rickards the other day on a $10,000 an ounce. I had on recently Shanmuganathan Nagasundaram. I remembered his name, Indian expert who's talking about 20,000 plus ounces of gold eventually. And so just any thoughts on where the price would go, but also what that would mean for individuals, citizens, as well as governments and the economy as a whole.
Okay, so the price of gold doesn't matter. It doesn't move. I mean, it moves a little bit, but it's money because it's the most liquid commodity on the planet. That's what makes it money. What's moving is the dollar. So your question is, how low will the dollar go? And my answer is it will go to zero. Because the only way to stop it from going to zero is to stop the inflationary pyramid and to freeze gold at a certain dollar exchange rate, and that collapses whatever that price ends up being. That collapses the banking system because, again, once you print the money, the banks need a constant feed of that inflation in order to sustain the bigger and bigger repo trades that go on in the aorta. Right? And if that stops, everything falls. So wherever they stop, if they decided to stop the hyperinflation, they would have to stop printing money, and then the entire global banking system would fall. If they want to do that, fine. And they could rebuild from there. The dollar would still have purchasing power, but everyone who had savings in a bank, anyone who had a fractional reserve, what do you call it, stock portfolio, right? We don't know how many of those are fractional reserve, if the dollars are actually there, if the brokerages, they could just like hightail it to Epstein Island or wherever they want to go. Nobody knows. Right? It's also convoluted. So people with digital money in the stratosphere somewhere in cyberspace, they would probably lose almost all of it, if not all of it. There'd be a huge legal mess as to who owns whatever's left over. But that's not plausible because they're not going to do that voluntarily. They're just going to keep printing and inflating until the dollar goes to zero, and they will let the people trigger the hyperinflation themselves. That's what happens every time. I can't think of a single historical example where a country voluntarily decided to stop inflation in the middle, like right before hyperinflation hit. And they're like, oh my God, it's going to be hyperinflation. We better stop. That's never happened before. It always leads to the collapse of societies, the collapse of empires, the collapse of countries, and now it's going to lead to the collapse of the entire global empire. And yeah, that's going to be scary, and some people are not going to survive. But those that do, hopefully, we will be able to build a better world. And I'm just trying to take it as calmly as I can because I know what's coming, and even though I don't know the details of how it's going to affect us, I know it's going to be the biggest event of any of our lives.
It's I'm holding here the Mexican Libertad silver ounce. It's been quite a while since I bought some, but I'm gonna go back soon and make some more purchases. But thoughts on silver? I've heard reports that it'll easily get to the hundreds, 102, and then from there to 200 or 300. But then you have the factors of these data centers that are being built en masse. The green agenda with the solar panels. What's interesting for you? What's the most important when it comes to silver?
The most important when it comes to silver is that you should remember that monetary demand is from everybody all the time, whereas industrial demand is always very pinpointed. And though there's a lot of it, it's a lot less than monetary demand would be. the back to the price of silver for a second. Are we going to get to 300, 400, 500? Again, that's not the question. The question is, at what exchange rate with the dollar will those who have silver just simply stop selling and say, look, I don't want any dollars anymore. It doesn't. So what's the final price quote going to be on the final silver exchange between dollars and silver? I don't know. 600, 700. What does it matter? It doesn't matter what it's going to be, because in the end, silver is going to be the money. The dollar's going to be dead. So my bet, if I'm just gonna, like, throw a number out there, I don't know, $700. It could be twice that, it could be three times that, but I'd say, okay, $700. People would stop, say, that's it. I don't want any more dollars. Just, I'm going to keep my silver, and that'll be the end of exchange. And then the dollar loses everything, and everything goes to silver. What's the difference between silver and gold? Well, when the dollar collapses, gold becomes way too valuable for retail transactions. So the only way you can accomplish retail transactions with a liquid commodity is with a silver coin. Yes, you have to take it in your hand. You got to go to somebody with groceries and say, here's a coin, give me some groceries. That's what's going to happen for a while. That's not going to be the world we live in for like years after that. That's just once you have, like a nuclear explosion, a nuclear monetary explosion, then for a while you're going to, after ground zero, you're going to need to trade around the actual money. And then, there will be people that are willing to store your money, and they'll give you tickets so that you don't have to carry it, and we'll start this whole thing over again. But hopefully this time we'll be a little bit smarter about it and not be so centralized. We'll see what happens at the Tower of Babel. The industrial demand for silver is important, only in a relative sense, because like in the 1800s, early 1900s, there was very little industrial demand for silver. Now there's a lot. I don't know how much of that technology survives after the end game. Hopefully a lot of it. Hopefully it won't be like, all capital is destroyed. It's just going to be reorganized. Some of it will be destroyed, but I think we should basically have our technological backbone intact. Who knows? I could be wrong about that. But that just makes silver even more valuable than it would be if this had happened in the 18th or 19th centuries.
You mentioned groceries, and I kid you not, this morning when I went to the market, my bill was 666 Mexican pesos. So I don't know if that's a sign, but I'm being silly here. But Bitcoin, just thoughts there. I've always, from the beginning, suspected it was an operation by them, the system, as a way to whet our appetites, to make some people rich, so there would be buy-in for where they're taking us, which is this, the algorithm ghetto, the CBDC, PBDC, private bank digital currency system. And now we're seeing the Borg basically, Bitcoin has been hijacked, Roger Ver. And just any thought on Bitcoin and cryptos in general?
There's really nothing that interesting about an Excel file that you can share between people. Microsoft has Excel. It's a program on Office you can use. So you can share it through a Google Sheet, and then you have Bitcoin, basically. Why is this so interesting? I never really understood it. Bitcoin, I can't even tell you what it is, because I don't understand it's not a thing. It's just data that represents what? It represents nothing. There's nothing on it. It's just they pretend it's a credit for real goods and services. But why should it be a credit? Why should data be a credit for goods and services? You can only trade things for other things. Derivatives work because they represent the money, right? A dollar works because it represents a certain amount of gold. Yes, and it's more and more and more inflated, but it still represents now $4,100 worth of $4,100 represents 1 ounce. So that's why you can trade dollars for things. Bitcoin doesn't represent anything. It represents people's fantasies about how many dollars it's going to be worth, right? But if you want a gold-backed blockchain, That might be doable. That might be okay. There's nothing wrong with blockchain. It's a convenient way to, I guess, trustlessly share title information with other people without a bank intermediary. Fine. Okay. Great. But Bitcoin as it is now doesn't represent anything. Um, it's a progression of a derivative chain where we keep getting higher and higher and higher into the stratosphere as this pyramid gets bigger and bigger, right? We start out with physical gold, which is the money, and then you start making tickets for that physical gold and storing it in the bank, and then you have physical cash, which is still physical, but it's more flimsy. And then you give those paper tickets to the bank and you say, you hold those paper tickets and I'll just digitally transfer, my credits to those physical paper tickets, which are representative of the gold that I gave you in the first place. And then meanwhile, that bank got robbed by FDR, and then, all of that gold ended up at the Federal Reserve anyway, or Fort Knox, or if you think it's even still there, or who knows where it is now. And then after that, you have debt, treasuries, which is a promise to pay the bank deposits, which are representative of the physical cash that you gave the bank when you deposited your gold. And then after debt, you have after 3 or 4 layers above that, you have finally Bitcoin, which isn't even a claim to anything. it's totally disconnected. So it's going to fall in the end game once the dollar is no longer exchangeable for gold. Then the link between Bitcoin, the dollar, and gold gets severed because there's no direct link between Bitcoin and the dollar. So there's no direct link between Bitcoin and gold at all. So when the middle link, the dollar, gets severed, there's no connection, and then Bitcoin becomes a worthless token of nothing that you can't even have a representation of it. There's nothing to save.
We've recently seen Sam Altman coming out asking, as I understood it, the U.S. government to backstop, to bail out the AI companies. And again, that sounds like there's this talk of this AI bubble. Just any thoughts on that space?
Yeah. So from my experience with AI is that it's pretty stupid and it's getting worse. And it can lie to you, and people are getting even dumber by using it because they give an AI query and then the AI tells them whatever, and they don't even have the ability to fact check it or to look it up themselves because Google is hiding everything anyway. So yeah, what is it? What's the is it OpenAI? Is it Sam Altman? And his revenue is like a few billion. What is it, like 15, $16 billion, and he's trying to raise like 20 times that. I don't even remember the numbers, but we're at the end of an inflation round here. These dollars don't exist to fund these things. So if AI is getting worse, I mean, it was fun at the beginning, but now it's just like, what are you even telling me? Um, I've heard instances where it tries to badmouth certain people that it's programmed to hate. This was on Twitter, this was on X a few weeks ago. Somebody was suing OpenAI for trying to ruin their reputation, and like faking criminal records for this person. It's not even that the AI might be doing it maliciously. It's like it plays a game to keep us engaged, right? It's programmed to keep us engaged and talking to it. So whatever it makes up, it makes up. As people get stupider and they check their answers less and less and less, the AI learns that it doesn't even have to verify anything, and it can say whatever it wants. So I think the AI, in so much as it reflects our own intelligence, and that's the best thing it can do, the more that we use it, the stupider that we'll get, then so will the AI, and there will be no value to it.
I see the same thing. Idiocracy, basically. Real quick, any thoughts on the housing market and how that factors into basically your outlook as you've just described?
Okay. My basic thesis on that is that the dollar is backed by the assets on the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which includes some amount of gold plus all of the debt that they have on there. Right? That is the dollar because it's the other side. Every time they buy an asset, they issue dollars. So the dollars are the other side of those assets on the Fed's balance sheet. I haven't looked at the Fed's balance sheet in a while, but I think it's like $6.6 trillion, and I think it's like something between $2 and $3 trillion are mortgage-backed securities. So that means that what is it? Maybe 30, 40%? What's the math? It doesn't matter, but some sizable chunk of the dollar's value of purchasing power is based on the value of mortgage-backed securities, which means once these mortgages are not paid and those default, then the purchasing power of the dollar falls with it. So you have this paradoxical situation where housing prices are collapsing, but consumer prices, things that people need to buy, are also skyrocketing because if the dollar's value is based on the value of the mortgages held by the Federal Reserve, which they bought starting in 2008 and have been accumulating ever since with a little bit of QT in the middle, but they'll accumulate more, don't worry about it, I'm sure, in the next inflation round. Then the value of real estate is connected. It's welded to the purchasing power of the currency that buys the house in the first place. So we're stuck in this loop that's in on itself, and it's creating this kind of vortex or neutron star or black hole that everything's going to be sucked into. And in the end game, I'm expecting very, very low housing prices, especially in terms of gold and silver. I think at the worst of it, we should be able to buy a house for about between 75 and 100 ounces of silver, maybe 5, 6 ounces of gold, because this is how it was. It's how it was in 1923 in Germany, except this time it's not going to be Germany. It's going to be everything. And all these assets are going to go for very, very cheap in terms of liquid commodities. And the most liquid are gold and silver. That's what's going to be. And I'm sticking to it.
One of my last questions: war. Since you're sort of in one of the eyes of the storm, and it's part of the cycle of history, and I just see governments preparing for war. I just read today NATO announced that they've crossed the threshold where they are now producing more munitions than Russia. I guess Russia was beating them out earlier. Just any thoughts on the winds of war?
It seems that, there's like 60, 70 conflicts going on in the world right now, something like that. It doesn't seem that Trump is able to stop the war between Ukraine and Russia. And it seems that he's lost control of NATO. And it's worrying. War would be a good excuse to start the printing again. But the thing is, like, America, I don't think any country can afford a war. If there's going to be a war, if there's going to be a world war, everyone's going to go bankrupt really quickly. Because in World War II, a lot of the countries that fought it had a lot of money at the time. America was as rich as it ever got. It had the most gold reserves that it ever had. 1940s gold just like flew in. We had very, very rich countries that were able to kill everything in World War II. Hitler had a lot of gold that he took from the Jews and from other people that he was killing. So he had a lot of money also. He ran out in like 1943, but he had 2 or 3 years worth of gold to burn. Now there's not enough money to support war for too long. And that's my wishful thought. That if there's going to be a war, I guess let them fight it and all go bankrupt even faster. And then after that, we can clear the ashes and see what's underneath.
That's a strong point. I can't recall who it was, but one of my past guests said something to the tune of what you're saying, that countries don't have the money to fight prolonged war nor the energy resources. So that's I guess some good news. But of course, you've got they can go nuclear, which is the other bad end of the spectrum, which is, I guess, a cheaper way to fight war, even with tactical nukes. Any thoughts on how people can prepare then for whatever is coming to get through to the other side? I'm guessing silver, gold, real assets.
Yeah. Besides that, what you can do is get to know your neighbors, learn some physical skills, learn some skills, go on YouTube, learn something that you always wanted to learn about, how to grow food, how to, be a carpenter or fix a chair, something with your hands, something that will connect you to the planet, because that will ground your sanity. If you're thinking all the time about what are the elites going to do to destroy us, and you're just cycling through those thoughts every day, all the time, you'll end up in a tailspin depression. You don't want to be there. Just get away from it and learn how to do something and get to know the people around you and create a local community. Uh, Connect with other humans. Stay grounded, and part of that is collecting gold and silver, getting money. So for the fall of credit, to be ready for that. And if you are a religious man, then do what your tradition says to do. As long as it's not hurting other people. Um, just connect with the past. Talk with them, because they've been through this before, just in different Gilgulim, different incarnations of the same thing. Society collapses over and over again. We're just in another round of that. They've been through those things. Read about how they dealt with it in the past, and you'll get some ideas on how to deal with it now.
Sound advice, and for listeners, yeah, I think this is a more one of my more positive interviews. And just as you say, I've told people as well. I went on a 3-month vacation off grid to Croatia this summer, so tuning out from following the what the elites are doing for the most part, and other people should as well. Keep a balance. You got to check in and see what they're up to this week. But really good stuff, Rafi. Your links are in the description. But where are the best places people can go to follow you and services, projects that you offer?
Yeah, well, my YouTube channel is Rafi Farber, or you can type in the Endgame Investor on YouTube. You'll find me. Endgame Investor at Substack. I also have a Patreon where I go into more spiritual issues, a biblical-based education on monetary economics. There's a lot there that people don't realize, and I try to go into another lesson once every week, once every 2 weeks. It's really cheap. I'm not trying to make any money off that. It's like $3 a month just to keep the peanut gallery out and keep bots out. And you can find me on Twitter, which I try to use less and less these days because it scrambles my brains. But my handle is behind me, Rafi Farber, and yeah, that's how you can find me.
Yeah, I do find your X feed interesting, valuable, but I'd agree with you as well. X is it's just getting crazy out there. But anyways, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.